Alright, hey guys, so this is going to be a kind of mini lesson on how to go about debugging. So debugging, as we've kind of talked about, is this process of analyzing issues in your code and figuring out what to do about them. So it's something you're going to be doing with every single assignment, right? So you're going to test your code and make sure that it's giving you the desired outcome. When it's not, you need to be able to go back through and figure out what the issue is. So for the sake of this, I've created a sample program that we're going to write. And I'm going to go through this pretending to be an intro student and make a lot of the same errors that I see while doing grading and just kind of stuff that first year programmers are going to do incorrectly. So once I get all that written, then we're going to go through and iteratively fix all the different issues that come up. So this is giving us a prompt here. So we're going to write a program that creates usernames from lists that represent a person's name, similar to that of like a school email address for a student, right? Or like a work email. So it's usually like, if I gave it my name, then it would produce something like A.O. Smith, right? So in this assignment, we're going to create 4 or at least 4 functions. First one is going to be create username, and it's going to take in a list of first name, middle and name, and last name, all as strings, and it should be returning the username formatted as first initial, middle initial, and last name. The second function here is process first name. This is going to take in a list and return the first name initial from that. Then there's process middle name, and this is going to do something very similar. We're going to take in a list, find the middle name in there, and give back the middle initial. The last thing here is process last name. So this should take in a list and return the entire last name. So for each new user or username, we are going to then store it in a directory of usernames, which is going to be represented as a list. So here's an example of this. Basically, if we're given a list and it's got Homer J. Simpson, it's going to produce the following username. And notice that this is all in lowercase. And so it's going to say H.J. Simpson is going to be the username that gets generated out of this list. So in here, we're given a couple of different things already created for us. So we've got person A, person B, and person C. So it's a couple of different U.S. presidents, right? And then we've got username directory, which is already initialized as a empty list. So we're going to just kind of get started here. Take this very first thing. We're going to create a function for this, right? So we want to say def, and then just copy paste this. This is going to have to take in a list, right? So I'm going to just call this name list, right? So maybe what we'll do then would be, first thing we want to do is get this first letter, right? And we don't have any of these functions written yet, but we know what they are going to be, right? So this is going to be process first name. And maybe this guy's going to make a mistake here. So he's going to say person A, okay? So going to go ahead and kind of do the same things here. And this is like, we haven't gotten all this stuff written out, but we know what these are supposed to be doing. So middle letter, and we're going to call this function that we will define later. So blah, blah. Then we go last name, and he's going to slap this stuff in here. And then finally, we want to produce a username out of this, right? So we're going to say username is equal to first letter plus middle letter plus last name. And then last thing this needs to do is it says it needs to return this. So all we need to do is use this return keyword, username, and that function is now complete. So now we need to fill out the rest of these. So we know that process first name is going to be another function here. So we say process or def, because we're defining a new function. This one also says it needs to take in a list, so we're going to just recycle this list name here. And so this one says it should take in a list and return the first name initial. So we know these are going to be always structured the same way. So this first thing, or the first name, is going to be at the first position in here. So maybe this guy's going to also make another mistake, right? So we'll say first name, and first thing he wants to do is he's going to grab this guy from here. Okay, and or not that. He wants to do name list 1 because these should be at position 0 or index 0, but a lot of people will just go through and say, oh, first thing is going to be at index 1, right? And then he goes, okay, so let's now slice this and get just that first letter. So he goes first name and 1 to 2, because he's going to try to slice that in very first character out, and then going to return first name, right? And then he goes, okay, so let's basically just copy paste this, because first name and middle name are both are just going to be initials, right? So say middle name, blah, 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 blah. And then middle name is going to be at position 2 in this student's mind. Spacing's incorrect here, so that's why PyCharm is mad. All right, very last thing then. Okay, so we need to write this third function. So process last name, again, just use this name list. And then he says, or he or she or whatever, right, so last name, oops, autocomplete failed me here. It's equal to name list and position 3, return last name. Cool. So this guy goes, all right, this is pretty much all done here, right? So now what we need to do is run this on each one of these people and put them into our directory. So they might say, okay, I want to put the first username at position 1 in my directory, and then I need to pass person A into this list. So that's done, and then we're going to do this a couple more times, right? But we need to do this with each person. Okay. And at this point now, they might try to run their program. So we're going to run this, and immediately going to get slammed with a bunch of different errors. So what's going on here? We've got, let's just take these one at a time then. So username directory, and it's calling, or it's saying, this is where the error started, right? So this is kind of a stack trace that it's going to be giving us. So we tried to call create username, and it's saying that now there's a problem in, so okay, so we start here, went up to this area, right? And then it's saying that it got all the way down to here. Let's say, so here we go, process last name, and that threw the error that we're trying to actually resolve. And it says the real error here then is on line 42. So we go down to this function, and it's saying an index out of range. So this guy goes like, okay, the problem here is that this is 0 index, this is 1, this is 2, so this is incorrect. So I'm gonna just fix this, right? And maybe he runs this again, and now this is throwing another error, and it says this error is on line 45. So let's see, list assignment index is out of range. So this one's saying specifically something different, right? This is an assignment. So the issue here is that then our list was initialized up here, right? So this has 0 elements in it, which means that we can't just put something at element 1. So maybe what this person would do is go out and look at the documentation, realize, oh, I need to use the append function or method, right? And even in here, the IntelliSense is going to come up and kind of give you some idea of what's going on. And so now we're going to just go through and fix all of these, right? So let's try running this again. So now it says, okay, process finished with exit code 0. At this point, we don't know actually whether or not this did anything correctly because we don't have any way to, like, it's functionally doing everything that you need to supposedly in this prompt, right? But we don't know that, there's no evidence that that's actually happening. So good, easy way, before we even get into like the idea of how to use a debugger, the very simplest thing you can do is we're going to just print out this user directory. Okay, so ran this. Here's the result, and this doesn't look like what we would expect because this should be producing JQ Adams, WH Harrison, WH Taft, right? So now we have a couple more issues that we're going to have to tackle in order to actually complete this assignment. So let's see. The first thing here is, all right, so first off, same username 3 times. So what's the problem here? And that's because instead of using our argument that gets passed in, or the parameter name here, this is actually unused entirely. So this person's using a global variable up here. So let's just go ahead. We're going to fix this. Okay. Now let's just run this guy again. Cool, so now this is a little bit closer. But we still have another problem, right? So this is saying Quincy Adams Adams. So that's not good. Henry Harrison Harrison. It's double printing this last name. Hasn't done any of the slicing that we would expect. So let's start going through and looking at some of these other problems. Okay, so first off, let's diagnose this piece. It's saying Quincy instead of Q. So let's take a look then at this function that is supposed to process the first name. So the first thing this is doing, right, is going to grab, or actually, so Quincy isn't even the right thing, right? So this should be John. So the first thing this guy might go and look at is go, oh, okay, right, so I fixed this issue down here with the indexes, but I didn't fix this one. So let's go through and fix those indexing issues here. Try rerunning this. Okay, now it's just slapping all of these names together and creating one super name, and that's not what we'd expect from a username. So let's take a closer look then, because this thing should be giving us a single initial. So one problem that comes up is we are doing a slice, which is creating a single character string, but that doesn't get stored back into anything, so it just sort of vanishes. And then this ends up returning just the entire string from name list of 0, or position 0, which would be John. And that's exactly what we're seeing going on in this output. So let's try fixing this. And then, of course, what we did was we had initially copy and pasted these, right? So this one's going to have the exact same issue. So let's just go ahead and fix that now. And let's try rerunning this. So this is looking a little bit better, right? We're down to 1 character each and then the last name, but it's not the correct character. So we've got, and like in here, we can see, okay, so it took the O from John, which means that we just did our slice incorrectly. So maybe we're going to go ahead and fix this. And realistically, we don't even need to be using slices here because strings you can kind of index the same way that you would with a list, because they're kind of just lists of characters, right? So first off, we'll fix this slice, and then we can go back and make this other part better. So again, and this is also another powerful part of functions. I'm going to kind of go back and fix this later, but so let's say we fixed it here, right? But because we just copy and pasted this, we're going to end up having to fix it there, and maybe you're not going to notice that immediately. So we run this, and this guy goes, okay, so now we've got the first letter. Cool. We did not get the second letter fixed, or the middle initial fixed, so it should be J and then Q, right? So, oh duh, didn't put this one in, or make that same, apply the same fix in this other location. Cool, so rerun this, and now our usernames are looking like what we would expect here, but they're all uppercase. And so maybe the first thing you do is, I mean, if you go, I don't know how to make things lowercase, then you might want to run out and Google this. So that's pretty much like where every developer is going to start, but just kind of cut throughout the middleman here. Google is going to tell you that .lower is what you want to be using. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different places that we could put this. I mean, you could just say first name .lower, middle name .lower, last name .lower, but that's a lot of extra work, and we're going to be returning one massive string at the end. So instead, maybe we just, let's just put lower here. Okay. So we're going to run this now, and finally we see that, cool, now everything is looking the way that we would really expect these usernames to be. But there's a couple of things that we could go back and fix. So first off, these two functions are doing basically the exact same thing, but they have one minor difference, and that is which one of these three indexes or indices that you're working with. But the rest of this you could be doing the same way. And when you see repetition like this, and especially, remember we had to go back through and make two different changes, and then we didn't remember that we needed to make the same fix in the middle name. So when you see this kind of stuff, it's a good time to be making a new function. So let's call this one getInitial, because that's the common thing that both of these are going to be doing. Now, the difference between these is we don't want to be passing in the full name list. We want to be working with just a string. So maybe we'll just call this name string. Okay. And in this, all we're going to be doing is returning the initial character. So whatever name string that gets put in, we're going to return name string and grab me the first character. And now what we can do is substitute all of that stuff out here. So instead of doing this, we'll say getInitial of middle name and getInitial of first name. Okay, so just anytime you go back and make changes like this, good time to run your code and make sure that it's still working as intended, and this one is. On top of this, there's a couple of other places that we can actually be cutting out a lot of code. So at this point in time, this code is more than ready to be turned in because it's doing everything it needs to be. It's got a little piece in here that's going above and beyond what the assignment asked for, but just to kind of show you more on top of this of things that you can go back and refine. So first off, we don't really need all of these extra variables. They're just doing, like, they're aliasing these pieces, right? So like whatever this guy returns. So that function's still going to return stuff in place, and that's totally fine. We don't need these. So what you can actually do here is we're going to just swap this guy out. We're going to swap this guy out. And we're going to swap this one out. Okay? So at this point, we can just chop all these dudes out. And we've reduced our code significantly here. And let's just make sure that this is still working correctly, and it is. And then in here, we actually really don't need to be using this variable either, because what you could do is instead just return this guy, and then using parentheses, we can say lower. I keep forgetting this thing is auto-completes. Okay, so you could actually just do this, because what this is going to do is with the parentheses here, this entire chunk of code runs first, and then lower gets called on that entire thing that we just appended together. So again, make sure that this is doing what we expect it to, and it is. We can see that our output looks good. And in all of these, we can basically be doing the same thing. So, like, let's just cut out this stuff. Like, we don't need this piece here. We can just return that. And same thing here. We don't really need this variable. We just need to put this guy in here. Let's kind of go through and do the same thing to all of these things, because it's a bunch of code that we don't really need. Like, it kind of helps to make it a little easier to read, which is good, but we can collapse this all and now really minimize our code so that it's a lot less stuff on our screen. This guy is already pretty minimized, and then this one is really just returning this piece, right? So we didn't really need that variable. So let's now just run this one more time, and everything succeeded. So that's kind of a mini lesson in how we might go back through all of our code, clean it up, and diagnose all the issues that Python is throwing and figure out what to do about them. So, hope that helped somebody out there.